Colonialism is violence, destruction, exploitation, racism, and a byproduct of capitalism. Violence is the only language the colonist understands. There can be no peacemaking or appeals to morality, for in the colonial world, those things don't exist. The only path to true freedom for the colonized is armed revolutionary struggle. This is what The Wretched of the Earth, written in 1961 by the pioneering Pan Africanist, Marxist, and anti colonialist writer Frantz Fanon, argues. He wrote this book during his time in Algeria, who by the late 1950s and early 1960s was embroiled in a brutal war for independence against its French colonizers. Fanon, who by the early 1960s became a full fledged member of the Algerian revolutionaries, who himself was born in the French colony of Martinique, was all too familiar with the destructiveness of colonialism and what it means to be colonized. One of the key concepts in the book is Fanon's theory on the psychological effects of colonialism and what he calls the colonized mind. Fanon says the colonized mind is one of self-hatred, where the colonized seek to assimilate into the culture of the colonizers, casting away any indigenous or native senses of culture or tradition, believing in the indoctrination that anything that isn't European, anything that isn't white, is savage or uncivilized. He says in a colonial society, there's a dividing line. On one side are the colonists, living in wealth and prosperity, using forces like law and order to maintain their dominance. Then there's the native sector, the shanty town or the slums, devoid of resources and opportunities, regulated to the undesirable land, and kept in check through brutal repression. Fanon also outlines his theories on the necessity for violence and his definition of decolonization. Fanon says that decolonization is the complete reordering of the world as the colonized and colonizers know it, putting them at direct odds with each other. Therefore, it will always be an inherent violent struggle. Fanon argues that armed, violent resistance is the only way to free Africa from the grip of Europe. He says decolonization is the creation of a new man that is no longer inferior or second class, but is his own person, with pride, dignity, and deserving of respect. Fanon says that if the colonial world is governed by violence, then the only way to destroy it is with violence. By the time of his death in 1961, the same year The Wretched of the Earth is published and released, Fanon becomes one of the primary symbols for the anti-colonial struggle. He is one of the pioneers of the modern field of post-colonial studies that we know today. His writings will go on to inspire a generation of revolutionary leaders from the continent to the diaspora, from the likes of former Ghanaian president and first Ghanaian president Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba of the Congo, Nelson and Winnie Mandela of South Africa, Malcolm X, Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, and many others. He is a primary reason for the spread of Marxist thought amongst African liberation leaders and revolutionaries. He believed it to be a primary fighting tool against capitalism, which is one of the facilitators and microcosms of colonialism. Even in the 21st century, where on the African continent, vestiges and scars from the colonial era and neo-colonialism still affects the continent and global politics as a whole, his words continue to ring true.